We have classrooms that we see are just signing in that we see each week. Welcome. If you haven't already, head on over to that Q&A. Let us know where you're joining from. We already have friends saying hello from Haverford, saying hello, talking a little bit about their tech they're using. So go ahead over there, let us know where you're joining and who you might be joining with into that Q&A. That's going to be where we hear most of your responses today. I'm here from the Penn Museum, and I'm here with my colleague, Miss Beth. Miss Beth, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks, Miss Allison. Glad to be here and glad to get started, or excited to get started with our lesson.
Yay! Thanks, Miss Beth. Miss Beth's going to be taking it away today, so we're going to say hi to Miss Jan. Hi, Miss Jan. How are you?
Hey, I'm great, and I can't wait to learn about corn, bean, and squash.
Yes, that is what we are doing today. We are going to talk about these wonderful products that grow from the earth. Miss Beth's going to tell you all about it. But before we get started, we want to say hello for friends that are sharing. We have friends here from Canada, our friends from Haverford, Pennsylvania, friends from South Carolina, and full classrooms as well as independent learners. So I am super excited to be learning along with all of you today. So Miss Beth, tell us, what are we talking about?
Thanks, Miss Allison. We are going to be talking all about corn, beans, and squash, which go by a very special name called the Three Sisters. And they're grown and used by many Native and Indigenous cultures in North America and First Nations. So I'm going to share my screen with you all to get started. And Miss Allison, if you could let me know, can you see the Penn Museum right now?
I can. Looks great.
Sounds good. So my friends, this is an image of the Penn Museum, the building where Miss Allison and I work. It's located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We're on the campus of the University of Pennsylvania. So if you're ever in the area, we would love for you to visit us in person if you can, but we're so glad to be with you virtually today. Welcome again to our friends who have been to our programs before. Welcome to our new friends as well. Before we get started, I'd just like to make sure that we take time to acknowledge that where the Penn Museum is located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, actually goes by another name called Lenape-Hoking. And this is the ancestral and spiritual homeland of the Unami Lenape people. So this means this is an area that's recognized by the Lenape people as their homeland. If you look at the image on the right, you can see an area in green. All of that area is Lenape-Hoking. So if you live in any of that area, if you live in the state of New Jersey, in the parts of Pennsylvania, New York, Delaware, or Maryland that are included in that area, you also live on Lenape-Hoking. If you do not live in this area, I encourage you to take some time, maybe after this program, to do some research online. It's really easy to find out the names of ancestral and spiritual homelands that are used by Native people today that might apply to the place where you live. And it's also a very important thing for us to recognize as a museum that's interested in history and the story of people throughout time, because it's an important part of the Lenape people's story. Now, to get started, just wanted to review the materials that we need. Like Miss Allison mentioned, you just need a piece of paper today with a blank side. Doesn't have to be blank on both sides. And a writing utensil. It could be a pencil, a marker, a crayon, whatever you have handy is okay. And you do not need those materials right now. We have some time before we get to the activity towards the end of our program. So if you have maybe a teacher in your classroom or an adult with you or an older sibling, maybe they can help you get those materials ready while you're watching. And just to remind you, we are in a webinar format, which means your cameras and microphones are off, excuse me, and the best way to engage with us today is using that Q&A feature. So I'm going to ask you lots of questions. I would love to hear your answers that way through the Q&A. If we have any classrooms watching, your teachers can type in the Q&A and send your responses to us that way. I also would love to know if you have any connections to the topics that we're talking about. If anything springs something to mind that you have a connection with, we would love to hear from you, because I always learn something new from you when we do these lessons together. Now, just to get started, for our friends who have been to our programs before, you know we love to start by talking about the Penn Museum, who we are and what we do. So the Penn Museum is an archaeology and anthropology museum, which means we're interested in the story of humans from past to present throughout time. And our museum has objects in our collection from different parts of the world that are connected to ancient and world cultures from different continents. So if you ever get to go to the museum, you'll see some of these objects. We have some of those objects available that you can view online as well. Now, part of our name is anthropology, and this is a big word that includes lots of things, including archaeology, but it's basically the study of humans, past and present. So there's many different ways we can learn about a group of people. We can study their language, their culture, so their beliefs and traditions, maybe their shared religious beliefs or their special traditions and holidays that they celebrate. We can study a group of people's language, so the words that they are speaking to each other, the words that they are writing, that can all help us learn a little bit more about the people that use that language. If you think of yourselves, maybe you have a special language you only use with your friends or your family or in your classroom space. That tells us a little bit about you and the group of people that you're a part of. We also sometimes study physical remains of living people or living things from the past. And they can help us learn more about the way those living things live their lives. And last but not least, of course, is archaeology, which is the study of objects, the stuff that people used. Here we see an image of an archaeologist uncovering objects that are buried beneath the ground. And especially when we're trying to learn about people who lived in the past, archaeology is super helpful because those people are no longer here to tell us their story themselves. We use the objects that we find to help piece together their story. But of course, it's always going to be incomplete. So that's just a quick overview of anthropology and the things that we do at the Penn Museum. But the focus of our lesson today is on 3 special crops: corn, bean, and squash. And these crops are traditionally grown together by many Native and Indigenous people living in North America, some First Nations as well. And they go by a special name called the 3 Sisters. So on the left, you see an image of these crops. You see corn in a bowl, you see some squash on the platter, you see an empty corn cob, you may see a bowl of beans peeking in at the top of this image. So those are the 3 crops that we're talking about today. And on the right is an artwork that sort of interprets this idea of the 3 sisters and their connection to these crops. So maybe you notice the faces of the 3 sisters appearing between and from behind the crops. This is a special artwork created by an artist whose name is Dawn Spears. And I think Miss Allison just shared in the chat a link to their website because we would love for you to get to know this artist better and learn a little bit more about the artwork that they create. Now, before we get started, our friends who have gone to our programs before know we love to make sure you know how to think like an anthropologist when we go through our lessons together, okay? What I'm going to do is show on the screen some images of anthropologists working, and I'm going to call out some of the things that you may notice in these photos. I have lots of questions for you today, so I'm not going to ask you to tell me the things that you notice this time, but I'm going to call them out, and if you want to share anything else in the chat, you're welcome to do so. But we see anthropologists walking and talking to people, right? Learning directly from them, having conversations. We see anthropologists looking closely at objects, like in the bottom middle here, watching someone tell them more about the object. We see anthropologists out in nature collecting plants and living things, specimens, and we see anthropologists looking closely at historical documents, archival material. So there's many different ways that anthropologists can do their work to learn more about a group of people in the past or the present. But one thing that all anthropologists have in common before they start their research is they want to start with a big question. So my friends who have done our programs before, you know we love big questions, and I've picked out our big question today that's going to help us frame our discussion about corn, beans, and squash and the 3 sisters, okay? So my big question for you, and this is the one I want you to answer and think about, is how do you treat your family and friends? Remember that our crops are called the 3 sisters, so if you think of sisters and siblings and family, maybe friends that feel like family, think about yourself and how you treat your family and friends. I would love to hear some of your ideas. Maybe it's the way that you spend your time together. You can name something like that, or the way that you show them how you feel about them. Give us some examples of the way that you treat your family and friends, and I'll share some things that I thought of as well. So we'll give you a moment to think about this big question, and Miss Allison is going to help me out and let me know the things that you are writing in the Q&A. Remember to put your answers in the Q&A.
So as friends are placing all of their responses in the Q&A, we have a friend that shared that their mom is an anthropologist, which is super exciting. Yay, I know. We have some of our friends saying, I treat my family and friends like royalty with kindness. Let's see. We might have a couple more coming in. I always give my family a hug and a kiss before I leave and when I return. I am always kind, really, really, really nice. Oh, I am nice. We have Mila saying I am nice. Hi, Mila. I also treat them with a lot of respect. So kindness, being nice, respect. Those are what came in right now. I'll let you know if anything else is popping up.
Okay, great. As you're still thinking, I'll share some of my ideas, but I love the things that you shared so far, right? We're kind to our family and friends. We care about them. I love that our friends called out that we respect them, right? We care about the things that they care about. It's important to us as well. Miss Allison, did a couple more come in? Because I saw your face light up.
I'm sorry, it's so
That's
nice.
okay.
I act like they are my art. I think
Mhm.
I'm really well. I try to play with them. I think I'm treating them really well, but sometimes, sometimes things come up. and and that you want your art to be nice.
Love it. Yes. I love that comparison to artwork, right? We care about the things that we create, the relationships that we create with our family and friends. Absolutely. I like that we have some honesty. We want to treat our family and friends well and nicely, but sometimes it can be a little hard to do. I feel that way sometimes too. But in the end, we want to be kind to our family and friends, right? Because we really care about them. Awesome. Thank you for these suggestions. So the things that I thought about were that we want to support our family and friends. And this kind of lines up with some of the things that you suggested. We spend time with them, we play games together. Maybe we try to support them as they're accomplishing a task, like climbing a mountain, like you see in this image here. I've never climbed a mountain, but I would definitely help my family and friends do that. Maybe we show our support through special notes that we send to them on days that are important to them, that celebrate them, like their birthday or a special accomplishment. So we definitely support our family and friends. We also nourish them. So maybe we share meals together. We feed friends and family when they come over. They share food with us. So we're nourishing our bodies together. But also, we have great conversations. We nourish our minds. We share great thoughts and great ideas together. But you can also nourish someone by showing that you care about them, that you have a love for them, that you really want the best for them. And maybe some ways to do that are by showing them the heart symbol, okay? Showing that you love them, giving them a high five to show that you are excited, a round of applause, that you are so excited for their accomplishment or the things that they are doing, or maybe a big bear hug. Some of you mentioned hugs as well. Those are great ways to nourish your relationship with your family and friends. And last thing I thought of is showing care for a person. So maybe you have a friend or a family member who's had a really bad day. They just need someone to talk to, and you can listen to them. You can give them advice if they're looking for advice. If you have a sick friend, maybe you want to send them something to help them feel better. If you have someone who needs help, you show care by carrying things for them, like groceries or other boxes and materials. Maybe you're sick and you want to stay home because you want to care for your friends and family, so you meet them virtually instead of in person. These are all ways that we can show care for our family and friends because we do care about them. Now, Miss Allison, were there any other thoughts before we move on? Because our friends had great suggestions about how they treat their family and friends.
It looks like we covered all of them. So that was really nice though, Miss Beth.
Wonderful. I thank you for taking this time to think about this big question with me because I think it hits on a lot of the ideas that are connected to that idea of three sisters and the relationship that three sisters might have together, the way they interact with each other. And this is going to help us learn more about the way that these three crops, corn, bean, and squash, interact with each other. Now we're shifting our focus to the part of the world called North America, the continent of North America, that's in this red circle here. Maybe many of you are watching from the continent of North America if you live in the United States, if you live in Canada, if you live in Mexico or any of our Central American countries, you're watching from North America. Now, I'd like to show this map of North America next. That may look a little bit different than a map that you've seen before. It doesn't have the exact boundaries of the United States and Canada and Mexico or any other countries. The areas in different colors indicate ancestral and spiritual homelands of Native, Indigenous people, of First Nations living on this continent. So this is just a different way to look at how this continent is divided up and the way it's recognized by different groups of people in the past and today. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of corn, beans, and squash and what we know about how old or how long people have been using and growing these crops. Now, archaeologists have found evidence that indigenous people in North America have been growing these crops for thousands of years, which is kind of mind-boggling to me that these crops could have been grown for so long. Originally, we have evidence that they were domesticated in Mesoamerica, which means they were taken from the wild and planted in specific ways so they could grow a lot of them and grow many of these types of crops year after year after year. So they were domesticated in Mesoamerica and then made their way up through the continent of North America. So many of the groups of Native and Indigenous people living in the United States, First Nations living in Canada, used these types of crops as well. Now, just to give you an example of how old some of these crops are, archaeologists have found ancient samples of corn that are 7,500 to 9,000 years old, beans that are 7,000 years old, and squash that's 8,000 years old. Now, they're not finding a whole squash, they're finding the dried remnants of these crops. So maybe the seeds from the inside of the squash, dried beans, maybe just a corn cob or dried corn kernels. So those are the types of things that archaeologists might find to help them sample these ancient types of crops. Now, on the left side of the screen, you see images of these types of crops that are in the Penn Museum collection. So we see dried corn, we see dried beans, we see squash that it's made into dried containers, a squash that's actually made into a rattle, which I think is pretty cool. All of these examples in our collection are only about 100 to 120 years old. So even some of these ancient samples that are thousands of years old might not even look like this. They may be even more broken down. You'd have really only very dried, small samples of them left. Okay? Now, the study of ancient plant remains is archaeobotany, which I think is a really great word to know if you're interested in archaeology. And it's the study of plant remains to help us understand the ways that humans have interacted with plants in the past. So how are they grown? How are they shared? Maybe how are they used for food? What recipes were they used in? That's all part of studying archaeobotany to help us learn more about the people who used those plants, including corn, beans, and squash. So that's just a little bit about what we know about corn, beans, and squash throughout history. Now, before we get into talking more about the ways that they were grown together, which leads to their name as the Three Sisters, I want us to think more generally about what exactly does a plant need to grow? Maybe some of you have grown a plant, maybe in your house, maybe in your backyard or in your neighborhood. I know some neighborhoods have community gardens. Maybe your school has a garden. Take a moment to think about this question. What do you think a plant needs to grow? What are some of the basic things they need in order to grow big and strong? Maybe to grow fruit or vegetables? Go ahead and put your answers in the Q&A. See if you can take a guess.
So, Miss Beth, we have friends coming in really fast saying that they mentioned sun again, water, seeds, soil, lots of soil, sunlight, water, air, space, water, sun, soil, air. These are what's coming in. Oh, more space. Oh, and more air. Yes.
Wow.
So let's see if anything else comes in.
Thank you. That was amazing. You had thought of exactly the things that I thought of, and actually one more that I think I'm going to add to my slide next time. So I thought of water, sun, and soil, just like you said. So maybe water from a watering can or rain falling from the sky. We've got sunlight, right? We need light from the sun in the sky. We need soil, which I think goes along with space as well. So we need space in the ground to grow our plants. And I really love the suggestion of air. I did not even think of that one. So I'm definitely going to add that to my slides next time because air is definitely important to help plants grow. So thank you. You just helped me learn something new. So these are the basic things that plants need to grow, okay? But sometimes we do things to help support plants, to help them grow in a specific way if we want them to grow even bigger and even better, and to help each other grow, to support each other, just like family members would or friends would. Okay, and this is how we get to the Three Sisters planting or growing system. Now, what we're going to do is look at the three crops individually to share some of our observations about how they grow by themselves, and then we'll talk a little bit about how they grow really well together. So this is an image of corn growing in a field. So again, I need your help. I need you to take a moment to look at this image of corn growing. And go ahead and tell me in the Q&A, what do you notice about the way this corn is growing? Maybe you can describe the shape or the colors that you see, the way that it's growing specifically. Take a moment to think about that and to look at this image of corn. And Miss Allison will let me know some of your observations that you will share.
And as we have friends placing that in, we had some friends also share that they have 20 plants and that you would also need love along with the seeds and the different types of soil and water.
Yes, great suggestion.
Yes. Okay, so some friends are saying for our close examination here, they're seeing that it looks dry, that there's dirt, it's straight and tall, lots of sun in the sky, not rainy like here. Oh, Miss Howard's class. Green straight lines. It looks corny. They're in rows. That was the last.
Amazing. I do like that joke. I appreciate the pun there. But yes, I agree. We do see some dry ground and some dry soil. Some of our friends observed that. But we see our corn growing tall and straight, right up towards the sun almost. It's a very tall plant when it's growing. And here they're growing quite close together in lines and in rows. It looks like it's pretty bright in this picture, so corn can use a lot of sun. I don't see any rain, but they do need water to grow for sure. All right, so great job. We're going to move on next to looking more closely at the way that beans grow. So again, my friends, we're going to observe, we're going to closely examine this photo. What are some things that you notice about the way these beans are growing? And these are just beans by themselves. Take a moment to look. Don't have to rush. And put your answers into the Q&A so you can share with us. Miss Allison will help me read out your observations. Maybe you can notice a difference compared to the way that corn's growing.
Yes. So it looks like we're having some friends just starting to place in here, and some friends are saying it looks like they're growing in a different way, growing on fences or poles are suggested. Some friends are saying it looks like it's scaffolding, which is scaffolding is definitely a nice observation. The green straight lines. Some friends are also mentioning vines and also calling out that they are short as well. Just checking to see if anything else came in. Oh, and we also have friends that are asking, where do beans come from? So the seeds that we saw a little bit earlier, right, Miss Beth?
Yes, exactly. So you would plant your seeds for your bean plant, and then just as our friends observed, I observed these things too. They grow into a vine, but vines need something to grow up. They need some support. So here, nettle poles have been put in place so the vines can grow up the poles as they can reach towards the sky. And our friends noticed maybe they're not as tall as the corn that we saw. They're on the shorter side. But definitely it's vines growing and they need to grow up something. So we see these nettle poles. I agree, it kind of looks a little like scaffolding. And the beans grow off of the vines. So you get your bean pods. The beans are inside the pods. They're growing off of the vines that are growing up these nettle poles. Great, great observations. Now our last one we're going to look at is squash. All right, so same thing. Take a moment to look at this photo. What do you observe about the way this squash is growing just by itself? Maybe you notice where it's growing. Maybe you notice particular colors or features of the plant. What do you notice about the way the squash is growing, how it grows?
So we'll let everybody just take a minute. Ooh.
Yes,
okay.
I'm having our friends type a lot today.
Yes, it's great. So we have friends that are saying it looks like a yellow eggplant. It grows on the ground. So the mention of the ground in the dirt on the ground. It's yellow. There are green leaves that close to the ground, and it looks like they're growing out is a suggestion as well. Oh, and another friend is saying that they grow on the ground, that we're seeing that ground here.
Yes, exactly right. I observed those things too. Our squash plants grow close to the ground. They grow kind of wider rather than vertically up and down. So you did notice that. Awesome. And some of our friends noticed the yellow squash that they see coming off. So that's the vegetable that's growing on this plant. I saw one of our friends in the chat mention shade. So maybe This plant doesn't need as much sunlight. It's covered by its leaves, absolutely. Any other thoughts, Miss Allison, before I move on?
We just had a few other things come in. We had a suggestion that the leaves look like maple leaves, so leaves that might be familiar. It kind of looks like a yellow carrot. It looks, sorry, it looks like it's more of a bush. And that they are plump, and that some friends are talking about that they love squash and it's actually growing on a vine, but the fruit is too heavy.
Yes, great connections and great. Thank you for sharing some of the things that you know about squash as well. I definitely agree that we see lots of leaves here. They do kind of remind me of maple leaves as well. And they are kind of on a vine, you're right, but it's close to the ground. So the squash are heavy, so it kind of spreads out wider than our bean and our corn plants. Okay, so great. You just looked closely at the way that these three crops grow individually, because this is important in learning about how they grow really well together in the three sisters system. Okay. Now, to show you exactly how they grow together, I'm going to show you a diagram in three parts. So first we have the corn that grows tall. You notice that it grows tall towards the sky, and this provides a really sturdy structure to help support the other plants, the beans and the squash. So next we add in our beans, our vines. So the vines grow up the stalk of the corn, just like you saw them grow up those metal poles, because they need that support. They want to reach towards the sun, but the bean vines themselves, the plants, actually provide really nutritious nitrogen to the soil. So they're nourishing the soil while the corn is supporting the beans. Okay, and last but not least, of course, is the squash. The squash is close to the ground. It protects the corn and beans and the roots from animals, from pests, things that we don't want to harm our plants. So these three crops can grow really well on their own, but they grow even better together. They support the growth of each other, just like family and friends, which gives them that name, the Three Sisters. Now, to tell you a little bit more about the Three Sisters and their use by Native and Indigenous groups of people, First Nations, just like I mentioned, the idea of sisters caring about each other, supporting for each other, just like family or your close friends, is how they got their name. And there's many legends and stories that come about the Three Sisters, and because of their prevalence in Native and Indigenous culture. These crops were grown year after year, and they were used for many seasons. Sometimes they were dried to use as food later. They provided really nutritious vegetables and food for these groups of people. But the legends and stories vary based on the groups of people, Native and Indigenous people, First Nations, that use and grow these plants. Just to give you a couple of names of First Nations or Native and Indigenous groups that we know of that grew these crops in this way are the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Mandan, the Ho-Chunk, the Pawnee. I have a list here, the Hopi and the Dine or the Navajo, the Tarahumara, and the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole. Okay, so these are groups of people that we know of that planted these crops in this way. And this is a system that was shared by many different groups of people because it worked really well. And it grew the plants in a very supportive way that grew them well so everyone can have nutritious food. Now we have a special video we're going to share with you that maybe you can watch after this program that gives you even more details about these three crops, three sisters, and how they've been used by Native and Indigenous groups of people, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that. But my last question for you that I would love for us to think about together before we get to our activity is, how do you use these three crops? What do you eat that is made of corn, bean, and squash? If you think about your own lives. We're actually also, I didn't mention, we have a special recipe that we're going to share with you if you'd like to make a soup made with corn, bean, and squash. But maybe you have your own recipes or special food that you like to eat that's made of these types of crops. Take a moment to think, and I would love to share, if you'd love to share with me, some of the foods that you eat that are made of corn, beans, or squash, because these are definitely crops that are still used today. And I'm going to actually show you some images on the screen of things that I thought of. I thought of popcorn, which I love to eat while I'm watching a movie. I know a lot of friends love to eat beans with toast, baked beans, or beans and rice. We've got squash made into zoodles, into noodles. We've got cornbread, and I have stuffed squash on the screen. I love to eat that in the wintertime. But what are some things that you eat that have corn, bean, or squash in them? And Miss Allison will share some of your thoughts that you're sharing with me as well. So take a
Yes.
moment to think.
Miss Beth, we also have our soup recipe I saw just got online. So I wanted to make sure to grab that link while you were talking about all of these delicious foods. We have some friends that are saying that they would eat them with anything, that they also enjoy soup. So hopefully you'll enjoy the soup recipe we'll share. That they like them baked, chili, that corn is a preference of one of our friends, and that was there only one type of squash and bean that were used? If so, what was the type? So that's a question that we have. I'll read off our really quick responses if you wanted to answer that question after that, if that's okay, Miss Beth.
Sure, sounds good.
Okay. We also have friends suggesting rice, that they like rice with rice, soup, popcorn, cornbread, stir fry, corn chips, tortillas. Hot chocolate can be made with corn syrup or sugar. Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Howard's class, for letting us know. Roasted squash and hummus with corn chips. Now I am extremely hungry for lunch, Miss Beth.
Oh, I am too.
I do see we got a private chat that said chili corn on the cob.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing some of your suggestions. It gives me lots of recipe ideas tonight for dinner or later this week. I think it's fun to think about the ways that we use these crops today as well. But I want to take a moment to answer a really great question that we got about the types of squash or the types of beans that were grown in this way. And that's a great question. And the answer is it kind of varies depending on where the indigenous or native group of people is who are growing these types of crops. So I gave you a list of names of native or indigenous people that we know grew crops in this way. So it kind of depends on the season and where they are living in North America that dictates what exactly they are growing. But I do know that navy beans were grown very often in North America. That's one bean I know of, but there are many different types of beans. And I do know that pumpkin type squash was grown very frequently. And then we saw yellow squash in our images as well. So there are many different types of squash that you can use. There's acorn squash. So again, depending on where you are on the continent, sort of depends what exactly you are growing. But that's a great question to research more about too. Maybe you can research what ancient samples we have of different types of squash that were grown as well. But definitely ones that I've heard of are pumpkin and yellow squash. So great question. Thank you for asking that. Awesome. Any other things coming in the chat, Miss Allison, before we move on to our activity?
We had one friend also talk a little bit about how much they enjoy rice, so using it in many different formats, and then chicken and corn soup was another suggestion that came in.
Ooh, that sounds really good. Thanks for sharing. Awesome. So my friends, we are reached our moment where we're going to do our activity together. So you just need a piece of paper with a blank side today, just like I have here. It's okay if it has writing on the one side, and you'll need a writing utensil. I'm just using a marker today. So go ahead and get your materials ready, and if you could let us know in the Q&A when you have them ready, you're ready to proceed with the activity, just type ready, and when I hear from a few people, we'll move on to the activity. We're going to draw a diagram of a three sisters planting together. Okay, so I will stop sharing my screen so you can see me a bit bigger. And Miss Allison's got her document camera up. Awesome. So we'll wait to hear from you that you are ready to go. Right, I see some readies. I see some more than readies. I'm ready. Great. So we're just going to start with folding our paper. So if you are still getting your stuff together, it's okay. So you're going to take your piece of paper and you're going to turn it so your long sides are in left or right, so in portrait. And your short sides are in the top and the bottom, okay? And we are going to fold our paper in half long ways. So vertically, it's very long. It's kind of like a hot dog bun, we like to say. So you're just going to fold that in half. And if you're working with a piece of paper that has writing on one side, you're going to want to make sure your writing is on the inside and your blank side is on the outside so you can draw on it, Okay, we're just going to draw on one side of our paper today. Now I'm going to set mine up on a clipboard so I can hold it up for you all. Miss Allison has got hers. Oops, I dropped my clip. Has got hers ready on her document camera, and we will get started in a moment. So you are just going to hold your paper, and we will start with our drawing. Now, many of you mentioned that our plants need soil, so we are going to draw some soil at the bottom of our paper. So maybe about 3 fingers wide from the bottom, you're going to draw a curved line that looks like a mound of soil. Okay, and that's where we're going to plant our plants today, our crops. Great. And that's usually how this type of planting starts. You make a mound of dirt. So the first crop we're going to plant together is our corn. And you may remember that our corn is very tall and straight up and down. So we are going to draw a line from the top of our mound up towards the top of our paper. Maybe leave about 3 fingers width at the top. Don't go all the way to the top. You can even measure maybe like the length of your hand might be a good measurement of how tall you want to make your corn. Great. And what we're going to do to make our corn a little bit bigger is draw another line the same size right next to it and connect them with a point at the top. And that's going to be our corn stalk. Great. So I'll give you a moment to just finish that step. Making sure everyone in the chat looks okay, or in the Q&A. All right. Now we have to draw our ears of corn, which are going to look just kind of like ovals sticking out of the side of our corn stalk. So I'm going to start at the bottom and just on either side, draw little ovals, maybe the size of my fingertip, coming out. You want to make them a little long looking, like ears of corn on either side. You can draw as many as you want, but don't fill your corn stalk up too much because we're going to have to draw our beans next. I'm just drawing until I reach the top. It almost looks a little bit like a cactus, but we are drawing a corn stalk. And what I like to do is just add some details, like the silk of the corn coming out of the top. So you can draw 3 little lines from the top of your ovals, just to give it a little bit more detail. So we know those are corn stalks. You can even draw a little leaf on your oval. Just like that. So I'll give you a moment to draw on some of your details if you like. It's okay if you don't finish this now. You can always work on it a little bit later. So we've drawn our first crop together, our corn. Our next one is beans. And I'm actually going to switch markers right now, so it's a little easier for you to see where I'm drawing my beans since we're drawing them all together. But if you have one color marker, that is okay. Oh, looks great, Miss Jan. Yours looks good too, Miss Allison. Love it. Great.
Thanks, Miss Beth.
All right, so to draw our beans next, we need to draw a vine that's going all the way up our corn stalk, right around the middle stalk that we drew. So to do that, you're just going to draw a really curly, swirly line going all the way from the bottom of where your mound is. And you can make some twirls as you go around, going all the way up and around your corn stalk. Here you can see I started mine in a different color. Make as many curls and swirls as you want to. And just stop when you get to the top of your corn stalk. And you want to draw some of your bean pods on your bean vine. So I just draw little lines connected to my vine to show my bean pods going all the way up and down my bean vine. You can see my bean vine and my bean pods. So now we have our beans that are supported by our corn stalk. And our last step, which you might have guessed, is drawing our squash. We have to draw that one at the bottom of our planting close to the ground, because remember, our squash grow best close to the ground, and they protect our plants from pests and animals and things we don't want to get at the roots. So to draw our squash, we're actually going to draw our squash vegetables first, and then we're going to connect them with another vine to connect them all together. So to draw a squash, I like to draw a squash kind of like a jelly bean, and we're going to draw it sitting just on the top of our mound of dirt here. So a jelly bean is kind of like an oval, but it kind of has a little curve in the middle, just like this. Miss Allison is drawing for us as well, and you could draw a little stem on the one side of your squash jelly bean. The squashes always have stems. If you'd want to draw something that's closer to looking like a pumpkin, the way I draw a pumpkin is to draw a C on one side and a C on the other side and connect them. So here's my 1C, and I'm just going to draw a C on the other side going the opposite direction with a little stem right in the middle. We've got our pumpkin. And we want to join together our squash with another vine. So make another curly, swirly line, just connecting those squash. And if you'd like to draw any big leaves like we saw in those other pictures as well, you can draw little ovals for your leaves. If you want to draw something that looks a little bit more like a maple leaf, go for it. Miss Allison, I love your maple leaf squash leaf. That looks wonderful.
Thanks. I got so excited about the maple leaf connection, so the 5 points.
Yes, absolutely. Great. And what I like to do too is just to indicate that our plants are planted in the ground. Oh, Miss Jan, I love that your pumpkin is orangey. I was going to say purple, is orangey. It looks great. So I also like to draw our roots going into the ground, just to show how our plants are planted. So you can draw roots going down from the top of your mound into the ground, because remember, our beans are nourishing our ground, putting nitrogen into the soil. And then I just like to add things that are other things that plants need. So sunlight, maybe you want to draw a sun in the corner of your paper. I drew one up here and the sun rays coming down. For our friends who said it's raining where they are, I'm going to draw a rain cloud and some rain falling because our plants need water. You can draw whatever else you want in this environment to nourish your Three Sisters planting. No rush to finish this right now if you're still drawing in your details, but thank you for following along as we drew it together. And I hope you have a chance to check out the recipe that we shared. If you have some time to make that for dinner this week, that might be a nice way to celebrate the Three Sisters. Looks great, Miss Jan. I love your smiling sun. It looks great, Miss Allison. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for following along as we created our Three Sisters planting together, as we learned more about corns, bean, and squash and the ways that they were planted together to support each other, and that idea of the Three Sisters. And I loved your suggestions about the way that you treat people that you care about, your friends and your family. I think that's important to remember this time of year. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to turn things over to Miss Jan in case there are things you want to mention about things that are coming up in the community of learning.
Okay, thank you, Miss Beth. So I wanted to mention that tomorrow we are going to go to the Army Women's Museum and learn about World War II and the women that fought in World War II. And then on Thursday, we're going to go to a national park, Carving the Canyon by Zion National Park. I imagine that's about the Grand Canyon. And finally, on Friday, we're going to take off with the Museum of Flight and learn about the virtual planetarium they've got. So, hey, everybody, get yourself registered for those. And thank you, Miss Beth and Miss Allison, for these wonderful programs from Penn Museum. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.